Blessed day, souls. I came into the garage because I wanted to read this out loud. That's it. I wanted to read this out loud. This is a book I received from my mother, who works at a used bookstore, volunteers, that as soon as I opened, I knew was meant to be in my hands, of course, as all things are. Speaking of Chronos and Kairos, the mundane time and the time of spirit, that sacred time where our awareness lives in the present moment, that which is beyond the fourth dimension, far beyond the third. And I would just wish to read this introduction out loud, because I want to, no other reason. It begins with a quote from the Song of Solomon. "Arise up, my love, my fair one, and come away. For lo, the winter is past, the rain is over and gone. The flowers appear on the earth, the time of the singing of birds is come, and the voice of the turtle dove is heard in our land." And a poem by John Ciardi, something like that, called White Heron. What lifts the heron leaning on the air? I praise without a name. A crouch, a flare, a long stroke through the cumulus of trees, a shaped thought at the sky, then gone, oh rare. St. Francis, being happiest on his knees, would have cried, "Father, cry anything you please, but praise. By any name or none, but praise the white original burst that lights the heron on his two soft kissing kites. When saints praise heaven lit by doves and rays, I sit by pond scums till the air recites its heron back, and doubt all else but praise." It is private life that holds out the mirror to infinity. Once upon an improbable time, in an unlikely city not given to adoration, an unexpected epiphany occurred. Shortly before Christmas, the only poor but contented residents of a Fifth Avenue cooperative were unceremoniously evicted from their home. The co-op board ordered its minions to destroy the nest of a pair of red-tailed hawks that had occupied a small ledge-sided penthouse for more than a decade. The hawks' eating and hygiene habits were simply unacceptable to the rich and famous. Too many pigeon feathers and inedible portions of mouse were falling to the sidewalks of New York. Overnight, the cult of Pale Male and Lola came into being. Hundreds of citizens who were inured to crime and grime flocked into Central Park with binoculars and telescopes, hoping to catch a glimpse of the blessed birds. The scene was reminiscent of the appearances of the Virgin Mary on remote Greek islands, which attracts hordes of the faithful. Websites sprang up, chronicling every move of the couple as they terrorized pigeons and devoured mice and rats. The devout kept watch night and day and reported every return, every gesture of affection, every twig carried in hope to the site of the destroyed nest. A widespread protest of the sacrilege went up from the supposedly secular core of the Big Apple. Suddenly, the honor and soul of the city were at stake. Could New York allow such injustice to go unopposed? Could the modest poor be displaced by the heartless rich? Could the last remnants of the creatures of the wild be banished from the city? The answer came loud and clear. No. The arrogant board failed to understand that it had an obligation to be guardian of the public, communal, and civic space, and that Pale Male and his family belonged to all the people. Avian activists stood out in the cold with pickets until the embattled apartment dwellers were forced to rescind their decision and restore the ledge to the homeless hawks. With millions of eyes watching their every move, Pale Male and Lola rebuilt their nest and prepared to start over again. When nesting time arrived, anxious devotees kept watch to see if Lola would lay eggs and produce fledglings. The first eggs did not hatch. Many feared that post-traumatic stress disorder had rendered the couple sterile, but in the fullness of time, more eggs were laid. chicks emerged from the shells, and fledglings took to the air. Across the city, the mood of mourning gave way to jubilation. In their short time in the spotlight, Pale Male and Lola were celebrated on film and in print. Messages arrived on their website from around the world. He is a good dad, the one we always wanted. It restores my faith in nature. My spirits are high. I know there is good left in the world. You have brought wild hawks into my life and made me think of them and worry about them as a family. Through the ordinary magic of the imagination, the two red-tailed hawks were transformed into winged messengers of the sacred. The gift they brought that Christmas season was the revelation that, beneath its profane facade, the prosaic city still believed in the poetic wisdom of Emily Dickinson. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without words and never stops at all. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all claim a definitive knowledge of the nature, will, and purpose of God that was revealed to Moses, Jesus, or Muhammad, recorded in scripture and mediated through cult, clergy, and creed, what the great monotheistic religions neglect to honor are the unique ways in which the experience of the holy comes to individuals. Being focused on the transcendent God, they tend to overlook the sacred moments, the sightings and peak experiences when a solitary self stands in awe before the miracle of existence, is astonished by the grace of soaring red-tailed hawks, is moved by the beauty of a trumpeting stargazer lily, or is comforted by a sonorous symphony of frogs on a summer night. Each person has a unique way of experiencing the world that reflects the multitude of events that make one person's autobiography different from another's. Our most intimate revelations of the sacred come in odd ways that may seem meaningless or trivial to an outsider. In those pivotal moments when we are struck dumb by the simple existence of a flowering tree, we detect faint echoes of an unknowable God. A brief opening appears in the cloud of ultimate ignorance under which we dwell, yet the experience is so private, so idiosyncratic that we don't know how to talk about it. We stutter in an effort to put into words something that is ineffable. But there is no way we can explain concisely why ourself and our world are unaccountably changed by such encounters. The philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein once said of this paradox of mystical experience, "There are things that cannot be put into words. They make themselves manifest. They are what is mystical." But what is indescribable is not necessarily inexpressible. What cannot be said straight can be told on a slant. The experience of the sacred may be sung, chanted, danced, put into a poem, or embedded in a personal narrative, autobiography, or story. We may point to ways, places, and times in which we glimpse the infinite in some finite disguise. Poets have caught a fleeting glance of eternity in a grain of sand, or in a tiger burning bright in the forest of the night. Norman MacLean's family found in fly fishing the enacted metaphor of grace and love. Suffering from frostbite, Willie Unsold, a leader of the first American expedition to summit Mount Everest, experienced an opening to eternity when he saw a blue flower coming out of a snowbank as he was being carried down the mountain. For the philosopher Ernest Becker, as for so many parents, it was the birth of a child. I think the birth of my first child, more than anything else, was the miracle that woke me up to the idea of God. Seeing something pop in from the void, seeing how magnificent it was, unexpected, and how much beyond our powers and our ken. The history of religion can be seen as a catalog of the ways the formless one has been experienced in the sacred many. It has appeared as a holy man or woman, shaman, prophet, healer, avatar, bodhisattva, or as a snake, bear, cow, pig, horse, river, or spring, so a red-tailed hawk may become a living metaphor of the divine. Each of us constructs a worldview and philosophy of life in which certain persons, places, things, or events take on an extraordinary burden of meaning, assume a revelatory significance, and the dramatic narrative by which we make our lives understandable to ourselves and others. Perhaps at the precise moment at which I see a butterfly emerge from a cocoon, a switch is flipped, and what was a second before, a purely biological event, suddenly fills me with the conviction that all life is a miraculous transformation. Think of the slight adjustment the eye makes that reverses figure and ground in the classical Gestalt puzzle, so that at one instant we see a goblet, and at the next two faces turn towards each other. Suddenly, an accidental happening becomes a coded message that speaks directly to our condition. Since all such moments happen to solitary humans, they are inevitably embedded in personal narratives, stories, and autobiographies. Only by sharing my stories can I give voice to those moments when my private life has been touched by eternity, by the unknown God. This brings me to the feathery messengers who have been my private angels. When Job's friends presumed to understand the ways of God and the reasons for his suffering, Job none too gently advised them, "Ask the beasts, and they will teach you. The birds of the air, and they will tell you. Or speak to the earth, and it will teach you. And the fish of the sea will declare to you. Who among you does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? In his hand is the life of every living thing." As I explore the numinous moments that have been central to my life, I often turn back to an enchanted time in childhood when I wandered freely in the woods. It was in those wild places that the love of birds and the quest for God intertwined to fashion the double helix that has informed my journey. I have not always been swept off my feet by the appearance of a black and white warbler or of a bald eagle. To paraphrase Freud, sometimes a bird is just a bird, not a metaphor. But the birds I am writing about here are those that have opened new vistas, inspired my mind to ask new questions, made my imagination soar, and caused my spirit to expand. The point of recording this journey is not to suggest that anyone buy a bird book and a pair of binoculars and take off for the wilderness, though that is never a bad idea. And if you are already a bird watcher, you may have been blessed with similar insights. My experience is illustrative and not normative. I offer this account of glimpses of the sacred that have occurred in my encounters with certain birds, snakes, and other creatures, in the hope that it may be useful to others who are in quest of the places, experiences, and metaphors that undergird their sense of the sacred. That is all. I am delighted in this. Thank you for your witness, and thank you for listening. I love you.